It started, as many strange stories do, with a single day refusing to end. Across continents and careers, ordinary people woke to find time had forgotten how to move forward. Not metaphorically, but literally. For some, it was a morning commute that looped like a scratched record. For others, a tragic moment rewound until they changed its ending. A surgeon, a bride, a teacher, a trucker, all caught in slivers of time that repeated themselves with uncanny precision. This isn't science fiction. These are first-hand accounts, preserved in journals, dash cams, whispered memories. Each describes the same phenomenon: time looping. The exact same span of minutes or hours, playing out again and again, as if reality demanded a specific choice be made before moving on. These weren't passive repetitions either. Those trapped in the loops retained memory. They could anticipate, act, resist. But no matter how far they ran or how drastically they behaved, they woke again in the same moment, like actors cursed to perform the same scene until the story changed. Most of us think of time as a straight line, arrow forward, never back. But what if that's only mostly true? What if, under stress or necessity, time folds? What if, when something must be corrected, the universe offers one more chance? These 10 stories challenge everything we think we know. They weren't just curiosities. They had structure, rules, purpose, and they suggest that time, or perhaps something beyond it, might care more about meaning than minutes. These weren't loops of punishment. They were loops of insistence, demanding attention, requiring action. A man relives Tuesday 19 times until he saves a stranger on the subway platform. A doctor watches a patient die over and over until she spots the wound everyone missed. A young woman repeats her wedding day, not in bliss, but in a cycle of missed details, until she remembers a necklace that was never worn. This is not a story about the physics of wormholes or quantum anomalies. This is a story about choice, about presence, about the strange mercy of being forced to get something right. Because maybe, just maybe, the universe offers do-overs more often than we realize, but only those who notice remember them. So we begin with 10 lives caught in 10 loops. 10 chances to understand what matters most. And the question that echoes through them all: what if the moment you're living right now isn't your first time living it? What if every Tuesday felt exactly the same, but not in a metaphorical, tired routine kind of way? What if it literally was the same Tuesday? In 2009, David Shaw, a London office worker, began noticing strange consistencies during his morning commute. At first, it was little things: a woman in a red coat spilling her coffee at the same moment, the train jolting in precisely the same way, the same overheard joke from the man on the phone. But as the day repeated again and again, those patterns became too perfect to ignore. On the 5th loop, David knew something was wrong. It wasn't déjà vu. It was reenactment. Every minute aligned with the last. He could predict the stumble of the elderly man, the exact delay announcement at 8:52 a.m., even the posture of fellow commuters. Desperate to escape, he tried to break the pattern. He missed his train. He stayed in bed. He yelled, disrupted, reversed his entire routine. But the next morning, 6:30 a.m., alarm buzzing, olé, it was Tuesday again. What unsettled him most wasn't the repetition, but the isolation. His wife remembered nothing. For her, it was always just another Tuesday. When he tried to explain, she grew concerned, not enlightened. By the 7th iteration, David began keeping a journal, charting the loops, recording everything. On the 15th round, a crack appeared in the pattern, a homeless man who stared at him like he knew. When David confronted him, the man simply asked, "How many times now?" He too had known loops, he said. Different ones, different people. The pattern breaks, he said, when the central event is altered, when the thing that must be seen is finally seen. So David looked harder. On the 19th loop, he noticed a girl, young, distracted, standing far too close to the platform edge. Always in the same place, always on her phone, always a second away from disaster. The loop wasn't about him. It was about her. This time, David rushed forward, pulling her back as the train roared in. She was shocked, confused, irritated, but alive. That night, David fell asleep dreading another Tuesday. He woke up, heart pounding, to the sound of his alarm. It was Wednesday. No one else remembered the 19 days he'd lived. His notes were gone. His wife smiled over coffee, oblivious. But David remembered. And somewhere in the city, a teenager who never knew she was in danger was breathing because of him. The lesson haunted him more than the loop itself. He hadn't been trapped by time. He'd been held in place by responsibility, by a moment he hadn't yet recognized. Sometimes we think we're stuck in routine. But what if the world is holding its breath, waiting for us to see what we've missed? How many Tuesdays must pass before we notice the person in peril beside us? And if time can wait, what is it waiting for you to do? It always started at 2:15 a.m., the moment the ambulance doors swung open. Dr. Emily Chen had worked countless night shifts in the trauma unit. She had seen blood, chaos, loss, but nothing prepared her for the night the world refused to move forward. A young man arrived, mangled in a car accident. Severe internal bleeding. Fractures. The clock ticked forward, and despite her best efforts, at exactly 3:47 a.m., his heart gave out. Emily called time of death, her voice hollow but steady. Then she was back in the ER at 2:15 a.m. The same ambulance, the same wounds, the same inevitable outcome. By the third loop, the familiarity was too complete to dismiss. She knew which nurses would speak, what tools would fall, which vital signs would fail. She tried different techniques, new orders, faster responses, but each attempt ended at 3:47 a.m. in a flat line. Her colleagues had no idea. From their perspective, it was always just one night. Only Emily carried the memory of each futile fight. By the 6th round, panic gave way to obsession. She pored over every scan, every possibility, desperately hunting for what she hadn't seen. It wasn't until the 10th loop that she acted on a hunch. Ignoring the expected priorities, she focused on a minor chest wound. It looked superficial, until she found it. A tiny arterial tear, slow and hidden, but fatal if overlooked. She repaired it. The bleeding stopped. 3:47 a.m. came and went. The patient lived. When she sat down in the locker room at dawn, tears blurred her vision. She had saved his life 12 times, 11 in vain, and once for real. Later she learned he became a paramedic, inspired by the doctors who'd saved him. He never knew she had watched him die over and over, rewriting a moment until it finally held. Emily never looped again, but the experience altered her forever. She came to believe the loop wasn't punishment. It was permission. A second chance masquerading as torment. An insistence to look again, to question certainty, to not accept failure just because protocol says you tried your best. In medicine, every second counts. But what if time itself sometimes grants more? And if we had infinite chances to save one life, would we fight for it again and again, even knowing no one would remember but us? What if healing isn't just science, but listening to time's stubborn whispers, telling us, "You're not done yet"? It should have been the happiest day of her life. Sunlight poured through lace curtains. The dress hung perfectly. Bridesmaids buzzed with joy. Sarah Mitchell took a deep breath and stepped into her wedding day. By midnight, she was a wife. The reception was a dream. Laughter, dancing, toasts that made everyone cry. She fell asleep wrapped in her husband's arms, heart full. Then she woke up, and it was her wedding day again. At first, she thought it was a dream, but the dress was in the same spot. The texts on her phone matched the ones she'd already answered. The photographer showed up at the same moment. Her mother cried at the same line in her vows. It was all happening again, identical. The third time, panic crept in. She told her fiancé. He brushed it off his nerves. After all, for him, it was the first time. Everyone believed it was the only time. But Sarah knew. She stopped trying to explain. By the fifth loop, she had memorized every detail. The speeches, the mishaps, the timing of every song. She began changing small things, different flowers in her hair, rewording a vow. Nothing worked. She still woke up to the same morning. Sixth time through, the joy faded. The ceremony became performance. The perfection now a prison. On the seventh morning, something changed. A quiet grief overtook her as she dressed again. Then she noticed it. Her grandmother's necklace, missing each time. A family heirloom meant to be her something old. In every loop, she'd forgotten it. This time she searched. She found it in a drawer, wrapped in a note written long ago. Wear this on your wedding day. Remember, love is about moving forward, not staying in one perfect moment. Sarah put it on. The day unfolded as before. Vows, kisses, laughter. But something inside her had shifted. When they drove away that night, the world felt different. The next morning she awoke, not to her dress or the texts, but to sunlight in a honeymoon suite. A new day. Time had moved. She never told her husband she married him 7 times. Never explained the moment she realized that a symbol of memory, a necklace, was what broke the loop. What she learned stayed with her. Sometimes we think we want perfection, a moment so beautiful we could live in it forever. But love isn't repetition. It's movement, imperfect, evolving, alive. And perhaps time waits not for us to relive joy, but to understand its meaning before we're allowed to carry it forward. In the end, Sarah wasn't freed by fixing the moment. She was freed by finally living it. It was supposed to be just another Wednesday lesson on World War II. Marcus Webb had taught this class dozens of times. Room 204, third period, 10:15 a.m. The students shuffled in, half asleep, books slumping on desks. A dropped binder, a sarcastic joke, the droning start of his lecture. But when the bell rang at 11:05 a.m. and he turned to erase the board, he found himself back at 10:15, same classroom, same faces, same awkward silence. By the third loop, Marcus knew it wasn't stress or déjà vu. The clock was truly stuck. His words repeated, questions echoed, and no matter what he did, time returned to the same starting point. Desperate to break the cycle, he altered the lesson. Taught about Rome. The students still asked the same questions about Normandy. He walked the hallways during class. Other rooms were frozen in eerie stillness. Students mid-blink, teachers paused mid-sentence. By the 20th iteration, he knew the script by heart. He felt like a ghost in his own life. Then a break in the pattern. A girl named Jennifer didn't look bored. She looked confused, frightened. When he asked her if she was okay, she whispered, "Why do I feel like I've heard this before?" They were both aware. Over the next few loops, Marcus and Jennifer tested the boundaries of their confinement. They were trapped in the same 50 minutes, again and again. Only the two of them remembered. That's when Jennifer admitted she'd been dreading the next class, a math test she hadn't studied for. Marcus confessed the principal was observing his 4th period, and he feared a poor evaluation. They were both fixated on what came next. On the 27th loop, something shifted. Marcus abandoned the lesson plan. He looked at his students and said, "You are not your test scores. What matters is what you understand." He taught from the heart. Jennifer listened, really listened for the first time. She asked questions, engaged, laughed. The bell rang. But this time, no reset. Students filed out. The clock read 11:00. Time had moved. Later, Jennifer found him in the hallway. "That really happened, right?" she asked. "We were stuck?" He nodded. They were freed not by force, but by presence, by shifting their focus from fear of the future to truth in the moment. Marcus never experienced another loop, but he carried its lesson into every classroom after. How often are we imprisoned by our own anxiety, reliving the same hour without realizing it? Sometimes the way forward isn't escape, it's engagement. And the test that matters most can't be graded. It's whether we truly show up for the moment we're given. 2:30 a.m. The road was empty, the night quiet, except for the steady hum of James Patterson's rig as it glided along the same 5-mile stretch of highway he'd driven hundreds of times before. Exit 47 to exit 52. Straight shot. 6 minutes, tops. But this time, it didn't end. James passed exit 47, drove the familiar distance, saw the sign for exit 52, and then he was back at exit 47. Again. He thought it was exhaustion, then confusion. But by the 10th loop, the impossibility set in. The world had turned into a vinyl record skipping on the same track. Other cars moved like glitches in a video game, repeating their motions, vanishing and reappearing. A red sedan appeared in his mirrors, then ahead of him, then gone. Time outside seemed frozen. Inside the truck, James aged in minutes that didn't exist. His fuel gauge didn't drop. His dash cam ticked forward. The clock stayed at 2:31 a.m. By the 30th loop, terror gave way to a strange resolve. He began to observe, not escape. That's when he noticed it. At mile marker 49, a roadside memorial. A faded photo, plastic flowers, a rusted cross in the dirt. He'd never seen it before. The next loop he TO'd, parked, walked to the memorial and read the name of a trucker who'd died there 15 years ago. He didn't know him, but in that moment he felt something deeper than memory, recognition. He whispered, "You're not forgotten." When he returned to his truck and drove on, the loop didn't return. Exit 52 came and went. His GPS beeped like normal. The time, 2:33 a.m. The world had resumed. Later, when he reviewed the dashcam footage, the impossible truth stared back at him. 43 loops, the same 5 miles, all recorded. But the timestamp? A seamless 3 minutes. No one could explain it, but James didn't need an explanation. He had felt it. The loop wasn't punishment. It was a pause, a chance to notice something he'd passed by for years, a life remembered, a moment honored. Now, every time James drives that stretch of road, he glances at the memorial, not out of fear, out of respect. Because sometimes time itself demands stillness, not to trap us, but to wake us. And maybe when the world refuses to move forward, it's asking us to look back, not for answers, for acknowledgement. The smell of fresh coffee, the soft whir of machines warming up. It was 7 o'clock a.m., and Nicole Torres was opening the cafe, just like she had every morning. Tom, the regular, walked in at 7:03. Large coffee, black, same as always. At 7:38 a.m., as Nicole balanced a tray of drinks, her foot slipped. A wet spot on the tile. The tray crashed. Coffee and glass exploded across the floor. The chaos was loud, embarrassing, but recoverable, until she found herself back at 7 o'clock a.m. unlocking the cafe. Everything reset. The second time she tried to brush it off. But when Tom entered at 7:03 and ordered the same drink with the same words, her hands began to tremble. And at 7:38 a.m., the tray fell again. By the third loop, she was certain she was trapped in time. She tried everything. Mopped the floor in advance, still slipped. Let customers grab their own drinks. Someone else dropped the tray. Closed the cafe early, still woke up back at 7 o'clock. By the sixth iteration, it felt like a curse. The moment demanded repetition, a spill, no matter what. But then, Nicole changed her focus. She noticed a girl seated nearby, typing feverishly on a laptop. A thesis, the girl explained, her entire graduate work. Unfinished, unbacked up, fragile. Suddenly, the spilled drinks weren't the problem. The laptop was. Nicole began to understand. The loop wasn't random. It was a warning. On the ninth loop at 7:37 a.m., she gently asked the student to move to another table. Just a precaution, she said. The girl hesitated but moved. At 7:38 a.m., the tray wobbled. Nicole stumbled, but this time she caught it. No spill, no crash. 7:39 a.m. Time moved forward. The loop was over. Days later, the girl returned, beaming. "I finished it," she said, holding up a bound copy of her thesis. "Thanks for suggesting I move. Someone spilled coffee right where I'd been sitting." Nicole just smiled. She never told her how many times she'd lived that moment, or how many trays had fallen. What she did say was this: sometimes the small disasters are trying to protect something bigger, because maybe time doesn't loop to punish us, but to sharpen our awareness. Until we finally notice what truly matters, not the tray, not the mess, but the person sitting just close enough to be lost. It was the intersection he drove through every evening, a quiet stretch on his way home from work. Just another red light, another pause before dinner, until the accident. Alex Kumar, software engineer, watched in helpless horror as a sedan blew through the intersection, colliding with a pickup truck. The impact was devastating. 3 people died. Then, he was back in his car 5 minutes earlier. The radio played the same song. The red light glowed ahead. The crash repeated 14 times. No matter what Alex tried, honking, running into the intersection, even calling emergency services, nothing stopped it. Time snapped back like a stretched rubber band, rewinding to the same prelude, the same impending disaster. He tried warning the drivers, blocking traffic. Every attempt failed. The sedan, speeding through the red light, always found a way to cause destruction. By the 12th loop, Alex was unraveling. The weight of those repeated deaths pressed down like gravity. Logic couldn't explain it. Strategy couldn't outsmart it. Then a realization. Maybe the loop wasn't about stopping the crash. Maybe it was about preventing those 3 specific deaths. On the 15th round, Alex did something radical. He pulled his car into the intersection before the light changed, at an angle that blocked all directions. Horns blared, drivers shouted, but traffic froze. The sedan, still speeding, saw the chaos and slammed on the brakes. It skidded but didn't crash. A drunk young man stepped out, confused and dazed. Police arrived quickly, drawn by the blockage. They arrested him. No collision, no death. Alex received a citation for obstructing traffic. He paid it without protest. But when he looked at the clock, it was 5 minutes later. The loop had ended. The 3 people he'd seen die over and over drove home that night, never knowing how close they'd come, never knowing someone had watched their deaths 14 times and refused to let it happen again. Alex never spoke of it. How could he? But the experience stayed with him, not as trauma, but as purpose. Because maybe the universe sometimes grants us the unbearable burden of knowing, not to torment us, but to offer a single question. If you had to live through someone's final moments over and over, How far would you go to rewrite their ending? And what would you be willing to risk to make sure they never knew the danger they were in? Some loops exist not to be understood, but to be broken by courage alone. Closing time. The chairs were stacked, the last customers gone, the register counted. Maria Santos had done this 100 times. The soft clink of dishes, the buzz of fluorescent lights dimming, her restaurant, her routine. At 11:30 p.m., she locked the door, turned off the lights, and headed to her car. Then, 10 p.m. again, back inside, the start of the closing shift, dishes dirty again, customers still lingering. She laughed at first, chalking it up to fatigue. But when the dishwasher broke, at 10:23 for the third time, she stopped laughing. By the fifth loop, she knew the rhythm by heart. The same couple ordered tiramisu at the same moment. The same pan slipped from the chef's hand. The same steps all the way to the moment she reached the front door. At 11:17 p.m., every time, a homeless man appeared. He knocked gently. "Do you have anything left?" Each time, Maria gave the same reply. "Sorry, we're closed." She told herself it was policy, health code, liability. The food had already gone in the trash. But the loop wouldn't let her move forward. By the 9th loop, she tried saving leftovers. He refused. He wouldn't take trash. On the 10th, she prepared a plate just for him. He declined that too. He didn't want charity. The 11th and 12th attempts failed. Each time, he walked away hungry. Each time, time reset. Then the 13th loop. At 10 p.m., Maria ordered herself dinner, an employee meal per restaurant policy. She ate half during the shift, saved the rest. When the man arrived at 11:17 p.m., she held out the to-go box. "I ordered too much," she said. "This is my dinner. Would you like the rest?" He paused, then nodded, took the box, ate quietly on the curb outside. Maria finished cleaning, locked up, checked her watch. 11:32 p.m. The loop had broken. She never saw him again. But the moment stayed with her, not because of the loop, but because of the quiet grace it required. Maria realized then it wasn't about giving. It was about how you give. Dignity matters. Pride matters. Sometimes people don't need help. They need respect. She had been stuck, not by time, but by indifference. The loop held her until she saw the human being behind the knock. And maybe, in a world that so often rushes forward, time itself sometimes stops us, forcing us to make a different choice. Not to change the world, just to offer someone a little more humanity. And in doing so, set time moving again. The library was quiet, as always. Rows of fluorescent lights cast soft halos on the worn carpet. Jessica Park sat at her usual table, hunched over organic chemistry notes, headphones in, the buzz of finals week pressing down like fog. At 9:30 p.m., she packed up her books, tired but satisfied, and walked out into the night. Then, 8 p.m. again. She stepped into the library, same table, same students in the same seats. Her pen rolled off the table at the same moment. The whispering group across the aisle laughed at the same line. By the third loop, Jessica wasn't confused anymore. She was terrified. She moved tables, left early, changed her playlist. Nothing helped. The same 90 minutes repeated, again and again, 7 times. Then, during the 5th iteration, she noticed a student across from her. He was staring, not blankly, but knowingly. When their eyes met, he said, "This is the 5th time, right?" His name was David. They had history, dated sophomore year, broken up badly, and spent 2 years avoiding each other on campus. He'd been looping too. They talked through the 6th loop, piecing together their shared experience. Everything matched, right down to the moment a librarian walked past at 8:22, the whispering students at 8:45, and the same page turns in their textbooks. But what broke the loop wasn't analysis. It was honesty. On the 7th repetition, they sat together and talked, not about the loop, but about their past. About the pain they'd both buried, the miscommunications, the silence, the breakup that had never had closure. There, among textbooks and glowing screens, they finally said the words they should have spoken years ago. Apologies, regrets, truths. At 9:30 p.m., they hugged, a simple goodbye, no promises, just peace. Jessica walked toward the exit, heart light. 9:33 p.m. Time had moved. They didn't become close again. They didn't need to. That wasn't the point. Later, Jessica would reflect that it wasn't the loop that was strange. It was how long it had taken them to face what needed to be said. How many loops, she wondered, do people live emotionally? Cycling through the same patterns, same avoidance, same silence? How often do we stay stuck, not because time demands it, but because we're unwilling to speak? Maybe time gives us second chances not through magic, but through memory. And maybe the only way out of some loops is through a hard conversation we've put off for too long. September 15th, 2020. In Milbrook, a quiet town of 3,000 nestled in the hills, it was a Tuesday like any other. Children walked to school. Shops opened. The smell of cinnamon rolls drifted from the local bakery. Until people began to notice, it was still September 15th. Not just similar, identical. The baker had made the same batch of rolls 3 times. A teacher taught fractions to the same class on what should have been 3 different days. A mechanic fixed a car, charged the customer, and the next morning the same car was broken again. At first it was dismissed as confusion, but soon the local paper received dozens of calls, residents swearing they had lived the day multiple times. 2, 5, even 9 repetitions. People who didn't know each other reported the same odd details. A child dropping an ice cream at exactly 10:47 a.m. A man tripping on the same step in front of the post office. The local journalist interviewed 87 people. Their accounts matched, not similar, precise. And then something stranger. In their final loop, many noticed others who also seemed aware, people locking eyes knowingly, nods exchanged, silent recognition among the time-trapped. No explanation ever came. No seismic activity, no solar flares, no experiments gone wrong, but a pattern emerged. For some, the loop ended when they made a choice they'd been avoiding. A woman called her estranged sister and apologized. A man donated money to someone he usually ignored. Another finally decided to propose after years of indecision. It was as if the loop wasn't random, but personal. A pause in time tailored to each individual. The town moved on. Outsiders dismissed it as hysteria or coincidence. But the residents of Milbrook remember, not just the looping day, but how it felt. Like time itself had stopped to whisper, "This moment matters." And what if that's not rare? What if time folds more often than we realize, quietly, privately, waiting for us to change something, say something, forgive someone? What if déjà vu isn't memory, but residue? A brief glimpse into what we've lived before and forgotten. In Milbrook, September 15th eventually passed, but it left behind a lingering question that the town still carries in its silence. If an entire day can repeat for so many, how many moments might we live more than once without ever knowing? It began like every day before it. A door swinging open at 7 o'clock a.m., the hiss of espresso machines warming, and the comforting clink of mugs at a Seattle coffee shop where routine was everything. Nicole Torres was no stranger to habit. As the morning barista, she had her dance down to the second. Tom arrived at 7:03. A group of tech workers filtered in at 7:12. Lattes, cappuccinos, light banter. But at 7:38 a.m., the day cracked. A tray of drinks slipped from her hands. The crash echoed across the cafe. shattered glass, scalding coffee, shocked silence. She cleaned it up, embarrassed, closed the cafe. Then it was 7 o'clock a.m. again. Same opening, same customers, same spill. By the third loop, Nicole stopped pretending it wasn't real. She tried changing everything, mopped early, asked customers to carry their own drinks, assigned the tray to another employee, but no matter what, at 7:38, a tray fell. The loop demanded it. On the seventh loop, she shifted her focus. She noticed a young woman seated near where the spill always landed, a laptop open, a thesis on the screen. If the drink spilled in a slightly different direction, that computer and months of work would be destroyed. Suddenly, the loop made sense. On the eighth loop, Nicole struck up a conversation with the woman, asked about her work, learned she hadn't backed up her file. Just one distraction away from disaster. On the ninth loop, Nicole asked her to sit at a different table. No explanation, just instinct. At 7:38, Nicole felt herself slip, but this time she steadied. The tray tilted. She caught it. 7:39 a.m. The clock moved forward. The cafe bustled as usual. Days later, the woman returned. "I finished it," she said, holding up her printed thesis. "Thanks for that morning. You told me to move, and someone spilled drinks right where I was sitting." Nicole smiled but said nothing. Because how do you explain that you lived one morning 9 times to save a file? The experience taught her something rare, that sometimes life doesn't scream at you to pay attention. It whispers. The loop wasn't about spilled coffee. It was about noticing the quiet vulnerability right beside her. And maybe, just maybe, every so often, time itself becomes the barista, serving the same moment again and again until we finally learn to carry it carefully, not to prevent disaster, but to protect possibility. For a man who believed in logic and code, the loop made no sense. Alex Kumar was driving home after a long day. The sun had just set. He was stopped at a red light, 2 cars back from the intersection. A pickup truck waited ahead. A sedan sped down the cross street. The light turned green. The truck accelerated. The sedan ran the red. The crash was instant. Glass flew like shrapnel. 3 vehicles collided. Screams. Then darkness. Alex blinked. He was back in his car. The same red light. Same music on the radio. The same truck ahead. Same crash. 14 times. Each loop, Alex tried something new, honking, shouting, driving into the intersection to block the truck. Nothing worked. Even when he changed the crash, the results were just as fatal. Then clarity. It wasn't about stopping the sedan. It was about saving the 3 lives. On the 15th loop, Alex pulled into the intersection early, sideways, blocking all lanes of traffic. Horns blared. Chaos erupted. But no one could move. The sedan approached fast. The driver, young, intoxicated, saw the blockade and slammed on the brakes. The car skidded but didn't hit anyone. Police arrived within minutes. No one died. The loop ended. Alex was cited for obstruction. He paid the fine in silence. The 3 people whose lives he saved would never know how close they'd come to dying, or how many times Alex had seen it. And that was enough, because sometimes time doesn't rewind to punish. It rewinds to prepare, to force us to see what we'd rather ignore, to give us the unbearable clarity of second chances. Alex would never forget the sound of that crash, repeated like a cruel symphony. Nor the moment it finally went silent. Some days we're passengers. Other days we are called to be the brakes. Not to stop time, but to steer it gently back toward life. We tend to think of time as a river, steady, unbroken, flowing in one direction. But what if occasionally it ripples, 10 people across different places and lives experienced what should be impossible. Time loops, real ones. Hours, days, even mere minutes, lived over and over with full awareness, not as memory, but as repetition. And in every case, the loop held a condition. A commuter relived Tuesday 19 times until he saved a girl from falling onto the tracks. A doctor watched a patient die 11 times before noticing the injury no scan had caught. A teacher and a student were trapped until they let go of anxiety and embraced presence. A bride's perfect wedding repeated until she remembered a forgotten gift of love. Each person was not simply a witness to a glitch, but a participant in a correction. These loops weren't chaos. They had structure, patterns, meaning. Time, it seems, wasn't looping to confuse. It was looping to insist, to highlight a choice that had to be made, a detail that had to be seen, a life that had to be touched. And when the right action was taken, however small, time moved forward again, quietly, without fanfare. There were no headlines, no scientists rushing to explain, just people who knew what they had lived and what they had done to finally break free. What's most unsettling is not that time can bend, but that we might not notice when it does. What if most loops go unnoticed because we forget them after they break? What if déjà vu is residue from a moment we've already lived once, or twice, or 100 times? What if we are all living loops, again and again, until we get something right? These stories leave us with no proof, no evidence, only a question. What if the universe cares less about time and more about timing? And when a moment truly matters, when something or someone is on the edge, time doesn't allow it to simply pass. It stops, waits, repeats, until we finally choose what was always ours to choose. And in that choosing, we move forward, not just in time, but in understanding. Because maybe in the end, the point of time isn't to measure life. Maybe it's to give us the chance to live it well, even if it takes more than one try.